Hey, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today on Breakouts.
Yeah, so excited to be here, Jason. We're two Florida guys. You're in Spain. I'm in Atlanta. This is one of the reasons why I love the virtual world. So let's do this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So our goal today is to help people understand how they can pretty much destroy this whole Zoom fatigue, the boring virtual events, and it all kind of kicked off with a post that you put on LinkedIn. It's been a while now, but it's still super relevant. I was speaking to somebody about this the other day, and if it's all right with you, I'm just going to go ahead and read it off, and then we can discuss. Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So you say, Zoom fatigue is BS. People aren't tired of Zoom. People are tired of boring Zoom meetings and or boring Zoom events. Want proof? People aren't bored by Disney Plus or Netflix. People are bored by a show or movie on Disney Plus or Netflix. They find a new show to watch and voila, they aren't bored anymore. The solution, don't be boring. It's fantastic. I love it.
It's so funny because you mentioned how you think it's still relevant because that post that was like 2 months ago now that I think that I posted that on LinkedIn. But what's interesting is I just had a conversation with a group of people on Clubhouse, the app, the audio only app on Friday, literally about this whole thing because not only is that proof, but one of the things that we brought up is if we remember attending in-person conferences, at the end of the day of an in-person conference, what's like the last thing you want to do is attend this really in-depth session because your brain is already fully loaded with tons of information, right? There's already kind of event fatigue at the end of it, but no one talks about event fatigue. They're talking about Zoom fatigue. And so really what's happening is in the event space, specifically in the virtual event space, we have to ask ourselves, what are we competing with when we plan our virtual events? Because if someone is in meetings all day, they already have that kind of fatigue that comes from just mentally being on all the time. So personally, I don't think it's Zoom fatigue. I think it's just fatigue. And so that's why I posted that. And it's because here's also the reality of it is with our company, like the center of the bullseye, like the tagline that we have for our company is create events that people love. And if you can do it right, I have seen this Zoom fatigue, and I'm putting that in air quotes because it's really just mental fatigue. I've seen it melt away with fun, with interaction, with engagement by doing the event right.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I mean, the reference to Netflix and Disney Plus and these things. I mean, how many people probably end their day where they've been on a screen the whole day and they have dinner, they go upstairs and they sit in front of another screen, right? So it's, I think it's spot on. And I think you have some really good ideas about how to get away from this type of fatigue, how to fight the fatigue. So let's jump straight into it. I mean, what would be your number one, your first point in how we can, begin to destroy Zoom and virtual event fatigue?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and before we get into those points, I do want to touch on something quickly because there are some people who commented back on that post and were like, no, like I've felt Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing. And so I want to say to that audience that like I'm listening and I'm learning from them. But what I'm also learning, like there is an article from the Harvard Business Review that I'm pretty sure that's the publication that put this out, but it talks about some ways to combat quote unquote Zoom fatigue. And for example, like the human mind is not used to staring at itself in a mirror for like 8 hours a day. So if you spend all day on Zoom and you have your camera on and you can see yourself, that can mentally be exhausting. And so what they recommend is clicking, like literally on Zoom, you can click the three little dots over your window and click hide self view, which is amazing. I mean, even as we're recording this podcast, if I look slightly off camera, I've got two different images of myself on screen, and I'm not even looking at that. I'm looking right here at the camera. So there are some things that we can do to maybe avoid what some people might classify as Zoom fatigue. But again, I think it's just fatigue in general from the end of a workday. So if we go back to this, so here's some things that we have found at our company Elevate whenever we're producing events for ourselves or for our clients that works really, really well to keep your audience engaged and really helps that fatigue again to melt away. So the first one is by interaction. And the interaction can come through in chat. Like if we were streaming this live right now to YouTube or to Facebook, what I would be trying to do is I would be trying to get people to comment on certain things and get the audience to interact, because it keeps them there. Because like, let's say, for example, you're doing this on a Zoom or on a Zoom or on a Facebook or YouTube. What might happen at your virtual event is if people are on their laptop, they might open up the tab or open up the window. Yep. But then they might go to some other tab. Absolutely. And if you can get them to interact with a poll or drop a comment in chat or answer a question in chat, then you know that you have their attention because they're interacting with you. They have to go, even if they're like have their email pulled up, they go back to the window and they type something in. And this is me doing my typing hands. I'm like exaggerating, but it's a really simple way to draw them back into it and to help that fatigue melt away. And the pro tip for that I have, like the hashtag pro tip for that, is to do something that's maybe not even related to your event or to your content. Like we call them no fail icebreakers, like cats or dogs. Everyone has an opinion on which one's better, cats or dogs. Yeah. Now, I personally think that dogs are better.
I'm with you. I'm with you there.
Some of you that might be listening to this or watching this, you might be ready to fight me right now about no, cats are better, right?
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
Jason, what do you think? Which one's better, cats or dogs? What do you prefer?
I'm on team dog, no doubt. Yeah. I don't even think it's a debate, but but it is.
And it's such a fun, simple one. People get really passionate about that. And then if you start off there, then you can go with something really your content. So that's one tip. The other tip, the second point that I've got is to break up your event into short segments. So even if you have even if you book a speaker for 45 minutes, say, hey, what we would love to do is we'd love to have you speak for 15 minutes and then ask a question for 5 minutes and then speak for another 15 and then ask a question and then another 15. And those short segments of 5, 10, or 15 minutes will help keep the movement along in your event. And it keeps it's almost like watching a movie. You don't live in one scene in a movie for 45 minutes at a time. This helps move it along. And then one that's our favorite for interaction and for short segments, I'm going to change my camera angle. So if you're listening to this, imagine I'm in a studio, because I am. And in my studio, I'm going to go to a different camera angle where you can see this is kind of my podcast setup, but I've got like a wall over here with a screenshot of a Zoom wall that we put up here so that we can interact with people in the chat and with their video on so that we can see their smiling faces. And so it's just something really fun that we really enjoy doing is a Zoom wall. And if you're at home, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can set up like a second device and either AirPlay it or something, but have the gallery view on maybe your TV mounted above your fireplace. So that's point number 3. And then the last one that I have is really kind of a bonus one, but it's kind of interwoven into all 3 of them. It's simply to entertain people. And I don't mean like do a song and dance, but learn what is your personality like, and how can you entertain through storytelling? Can you entertain people through statistics? Can you entertain people through, I could replace my slot here with our studio with a video or a full-size picture to help tell the story. And so entertainment is important because people are used to being entertained. Going back to the Disney Plus and Netflix comment that I made in that LinkedIn post, people are used to being entertained by their screens, and we can do that. It's just a good event principle in general because you want to hold their attention.
Yeah, that's really, really nice. There's a lot to digest there, but I think those 4 points are fantastic. I mean, number 1, let's start with the first one. So we're talking about interaction. Let's dig into that a little bit deeper. Yeah. I mean, in terms of interaction, I think it's so key to get people involved and engaged immediately. I mean, I don't know about you, but right now I probably have, I can't even count how many tabs I have open right now. And I think I'm not alone there. And so really oftentimes your event is living in one of the tabs on somebody's browser, right? So essentially your tab is competing against all the other tabs that they have open. And you're 100% right, which is if you can get them to interact with your event or your tab, you're winning, because you're getting them to chat, you're getting them to take the poll. And I guess in terms of like, would you do that from the very beginning? I mean, would that be one of the first things that you do as part of your event, is try to get them to get into the chat? To how would you approach that?
Yeah. So I got a quick example for you of how people can learn and from approaching it, because it was literally a master class of kicking off an event the right way.
All
So Anne, who's a friend of ours that is now head of community at Twine,
right.
and she was running an event on Friday, and literally like as people were logging in, so probably for about 5 minutes before like the official quote unquote event, up until about 3 to 4 minutes inside of it, one of the things that she did is she had Slido, it's sli.do if you're not familiar with it.
Yep.
And she had polls. She had like word maps where you would type in a word. And so literally what she did is just for the first 5 minutes, that's all she had. She was screen sharing that. She had her video on. She was answering people's question in the Zoom chat, as well as then interacting with the polls and different things on Slido. And so that in itself is a great example. And we do that for our company all the time too, for our clients. One of the first things we try to do, and it's really a no fail, is if they aren't already named, if they're like on a Zoom, get them to rename themselves. But then you can also just say, hey, type in, where are you watching from? Where are you tuning in from? And people are passionate about where they live at, or where they're on vacation at, or wherever that is. And they get really excited for small things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a really great example. I think at least the events I've enjoyed the most are the ones where I've made an effort to get involved and get involved in the chat. And any way that we can encourage people to do that is fantastic. I love the example of Anne with the Slido, the polls, and really making people feel like they're part of what's going on, and they can in some way or another kind of affect the outcome of what's going on. Right? It's much more engaging in that sense. Awesome. Let's dig into the second one. So the short segments. I mean, in terms of, I think you said 15-minute segments, right? If as an example for the speakers, that's kind of the guidelines that you would provide.
Yeah, whenever I recommend to people, I say no longer than 15 to 20 seconds, or not 20 seconds, 15 minutes to 20 minutes. So between 15 and 20 minutes should be the longest that you go in one thing without doing something either interactive or changing it up. So for example, you could do like a 15-minute TED Talks, like style TED Talk, and then do 5-minute Q&A, and then do another 15-minute TED Talk from someone else. Or you could do 15-minute TED Talk, and then 15-minute Q&A, and then 15-minute panel. So different short segments like that.
Yeah, that's. I think that's great. In terms of the types of segments, do you guys try to change up the style pretty often? So you have like speaker panels, videos. I mean, not just making the segment shorter, but also diversifying the types of segments that there are.
Yeah, that's interesting. It just depends on the event, right? So like we do, most of the events that we do for our own company that we get full control over are short. There would be 1 hour or 30-minute webinar workshops that we treat like a virtual event. And that's really lead gen for us. We teach, literally just did a hybrid events masterclass. I've got pulled up in front of me the slides from the virtual icebreakers masterclass that we teach. So we teach a lot of those, and some of those are about an hour long, and they're usually 1 or 2 people in front of the camera. And in that instance, we don't, because of the limitations of the webinar platform and different things, what we try to do then instead is, rather than maybe switch up the content delivery style every 15 minutes, what we do is we keep that the same, but every 5, 10, or 15 minutes, we're interacting with the audience in some way. We're asking them a question and getting them to put it in chat, so that it's constantly bring them back. There's a woman named Amy Porterfield
Hmm.
who has an entire business teaching people how to do online courses. And
Mm.
she does a bunch of free webinars. She has them running just evergreen. And if you ever take one of her webinars, probably about every 10 minutes, you hear her say this phrase, "Hey, if you're multitasking, come back to me."
Oh,
Because
really?
she knows exactly like you said, like I'm guilty too. I've got a million
Yeah.
tabs open. And so I need to be brought back to it. So I know that our audience needs to be brought back to it. And so if you can't change up the content delivery style, at
Mm.
least interact with your audience every so often.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. That's excellent, excellent advice. And I love that that there's somebody out there actually calling people out, like directly. Hey, I know you're not paying attention, so come on, back over here, no?
Mhm.
um, Amazing. And then so the third one that you brought up, can you repeat what that point was? That was the
Yeah, that was the Zoom wall for interaction.
okay. Yes.
That one can be kind of difficult to do if you don't have the right hardware.
Mhm.
But here's the thing: is that if you have a separate laptop and you're on Zoom and you have another like a TV monitor, then you
Mhm.
can do it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
have to be. It doesn't have to be fancy. Like my wife and I, we bought a second TV off of Facebook Marketplace for $40,
Okay.
and that's now like my home work from home studio TV.
Okay.
And it's nothing fancy. Like the audio on it is awful. It's funny. Like we plugged it in. We tried playing a movie through it. We're like, oh, this thing sounds
Nah,
awful. No
nah.
wonder why someone played it, like gave it away for $40. But
Yeah.
it's a pretty big TV, and the
Yeah.
screen looks great, and I don't
Mhm.
really need the audio.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm,
It's a really good piece of advice, and it's really in order to have a home studio these days, it's really the options are much more affordable than they used to be. I
yeah,
think even for people working from home, and a lot of people are right now, you can really upgrade your setup at a pretty reasonable price, and it's worth it too. I mean, I talk about this a lot. Is that before it was about what you wore to the office or what you wore when you were presenting to clients. That was your
mhm,
image. A lot of times, like your how your video screen is looking is the image that you're kind of putting out there to potential
yep,
clients and partners. And yeah, I love the idea of like, yeah, jump onto Facebook Marketplace or eBay or whatever it is, and you can find some of these things at pretty reasonable prices to upgrade your look and help promote the interaction even from home. Um,
100%. Well, and to that point, so during the hybrid events masterclass, we had these 3 questions that we repeated probably 10 times during that masterclass when Alice
mm,
and I were teaching it. And the 3 questions were simple. They were, what will they see? What
mm,
will they hear? And
mm,
how will they interact? And we
yeah,
asked those 3 questions multiple times during that masterclass when we were talking
mm,
about the different elements of the event.
mhm,
And to your point with the audio and video, like because this is all that they have, like we don't have them walking into a ballroom on
right,
on a virtual event, or even
mhm,
half of your audience during a hybrid event.
mm,
They're just logging onto their computer. So
mhm,
if they can't see you and they can't hear you, that's a big deal.
yeah,
And it's super important. Now, here's the other tough part, right? Is like sometimes it's not up to our technology, it's up to their technology,
yeah, yeah,
which
fair,
can be frustrating because you're like, hey, I'm doing everything I can. I'm hardwired in, I've got an
yeah,
amazing camera, I've got lighting.
yeah.
So it's sometimes it's on them, but that's
Mm.
just life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially when it comes to like internet connections and
Yep.
audio skipping, and a lot of times you're doing all you can, but it's actually not on your side. You can't control the other side. But yeah, this is part of the growing pains, right, of the of the virtual world. And then finally, let's dig into the last one, because I think I like that you've added this, the entertain people. And
Hmm.
um, so much I mean, it's so all related, really. You're competing for attention, and you do that by interaction, by having short segments, by having things like a Zoom wall and things that promote interaction. They can be part of the show, and also
Hmm.
just providing entertainment. It's a fantastic point that a lot of people overlook, and so many of the webinars and Zoom events and things I've seen, they completely miss on the entertainment side. And
Hmm.
what other types of entertainment tips would you have? How would you? I mean, you mentioned storytelling. Have you guys worked with like actual entertainers as well?
We have. So some of the events that we've produced, we've brought in musical artists where they'll do a set beforehand and maybe afterwards during the show, like a live guitarist playing. There's this amazing guy. His name is Jason Eskridge. So great name, right?
Yeah, like
Jason,
it.
but Jason Eskridge out of Nashville, who we brought in, and he's an incredible vocalist. Like I had chills during half of his performance for this.
Cool.
It was a online fundraising event.
Okay.
So that's one. We've brought in spoken word artists, which it was really fun to, the way that we did it is we did a Q&A with the spoken word artist where she came in and sat down with our founder and president, and he literally interviewed her first. And then she just kind of like looked at the camera at the end of it. And he's like, all right, hey, we're so excited to check this out. She looked at the camera and it felt like she was like looking into your soul. Wow. And then she did her piece and it was so incredibly good.
How cool.
So you can do things like that. There's a company that we partner with that are friends of ours here in the Atlanta area called The Sketch Effect. And they will tune into your online event or go to your in-person event, and they will live sketch. They'll listen to what the conversation is being talked about, like what's being shared, and they will have a virtual or a graphic representation of it, like a pictures, words. It's really, really cool. If it's done virtually, it'll be a time-lapse video that you can share on social media. Nice. So there's different ways that you can do that. And I've seen some events where they have that going on during the keynote talk. And then every once in a while, they will pull it up and they'll show like, hey, here's the map of what's been talked about so far, which is fun. I mean, sharing GIFs, people enjoy GIFs. They enjoy memes. Like, it's just, how do you enjoy, like, here's a recommendation I have. If someone's listening to this, like, just Google like the top rated TED Talks, or go to YouTube and just type in how to communicate effectively, and learn and see what are those communicators doing. And then adopt that into an online, a virtual space, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, because there are two sides to that, the entertainment coin, isn't there? There's the professional entertainers, but there's a bit of responsibility on the speakers to be more entertaining, to be more, I don't know, charismatic in some ways. And it's not easy, especially when you're standing in your house presenting, or in a studio. You can't see the audience. It's a totally different ballgame for speakers these days, performing to basically a camera. But it's a great tip to go and watch people who are doing it and try to pick up. And I think as well, just like practice, right? Don't be afraid to jump on the stage on Clubhouse. Don't be afraid to accept interviews. Don't be afraid. Put yourself out there and keep learning and practicing. I mean, we all started out at some point, and probably the first time we were not the most engaging personalities on the planet. So entertainment also comes down to the individual speaker.
It's true. And there's only so much that you can do, right? Because here's the other part of the equation is everyone talks about right now wanting their audience to be engaged. Well, you can go, like, have you ever seen the movie Hitch, where it's like Will Smith and he's like a dating coach for the comedian Kevin, can't remember his name, Kevin something. But anyways, he's coaching him how to like give like the first kiss. And he says like, you go in like 70% and let her come 30, or you go in 90 and she comes in 10. It was a really funny moment where like the two dudes end up kissing. It was a really funny comedy movie. And what's interesting is, as event professional, that's kind of what it's like with the event engagement. We can only go so far. And then our audience has to meet us to a certain point. So take a little bit, if you're listening to this or watching this, take a little bit of the pressure off of yourself, because it's not just on you. Partly it's on the audience. Now, we need to do everything we can to keep them engaged and to get them engaged, but it is partly up to the audience. Because if they don't want to be there, if they don't want to interact, if they don't want to listen, if they don't want to watch, that's not on you. So
yeah, no, great point. Like, I like that example a lot, because we can do as much as we can, but if somebody's surfing on another tab, or if somebody's cooking or doing something else, you can't control that, but you can push it to a point where you've given them as much opportunity to engage as possible. That's a really great way of looking at it. Man, a really full packed episode of some great advice here. I really hope that the people listening are going to take some of this and apply it. And thank you so much for joining and coming on and sharing your expertise, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jason. This has been so fun. And do you mind if I drop in like where they can check out our content
Absolutely.
for Elevate?
Please.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're watching this, listening to this, so I work for a company called Elevate's, the big logo that's behind me. On YouTube, we've got incredible icebreaker games, so you can find us. Just search for Elevate Experiences on YouTube, and that's also our social media. So Instagram at Elevate Experiences, and then me, myself, I'm at Sean Specie on most platforms except for now on Clubhouse. You can search for me, Sean Specie, just my name, or you can find me. I'm at Events MC, and Clubhouse is like my new favorite platform. So I'm just pitching that everywhere. I know that you're on there. It's been fun to have some conversations, but that's there. And I'm hanging out on LinkedIn most, Sean Specie. So it's been a pleasure, Jason. It's been so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. And I'm going to throw all that up. We'll put up a little blog piece about this too. We'll share that. Also, we'll throw a little plug for the masterclass that you have coming up for the Clubhouse moderation, because you are killing it over there as well. So yeah, let's continue to collaborate, man. This has been fun.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, this has been such a pleasure.
All right, take care, Sean.
All right, see you, Jason.
See you.